Welcome to another episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast, a safe place for real talk on discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. My name's Sanjay Patel, and I'm a transformational life coach. And this week, I have another special guest that is Robert Stephenson from Animas Centre of Coaching. Robert talks us through his younger years growing up in the East End of London and the transition to the world of dance, ballet, and miming. And in his words, it was like being in two worlds. Robert then goes on to tell us how he got into hosting workshops, teaching, and then becoming a valuable asset to one of the best coaching schools in the world. There are so many amazing nuggets of knowledge throughout this whole conversation which Robert shares. This is a must listen for those opportunistics that say yes to opportunities. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to another Ignite Your Mind podcast. And again, I'll come with these special guests. Today, I have got Mr. Robert Stephenson. Robert, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited to be having this conversation with you and kind of seeing where it goes.
I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you jumping on. So Robert, just for people who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Robert Stephenson. I am the Centre Director at Animas Centre for Coaching. So I work in managing and supporting the teams that work there and kind of helping holding the ship together, as it were. I also have various special projects that I run for myself, including the podcasts that we do, the interviews, creating the new courses, and also beginning to work with the sort of social impact end of what we do as well.
Amazing. So you do quite a lot. It's quite a mouthful, but a good thing. And I know you're doing good things. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get Robert on this podcast with myself is because, as if you've been listening to my other podcasts, I'm all about inspiring journeys and people that have gone from, nothing to something and doing something really impactful with their lives. And I fully believe being a coach, and obviously I studied at Animus, so that's how I know you, but I fully believe that being a coach and in this industry of personal development, there is massive ways to make and create some super important impact in the world and people's lives. So what I wanted to do, Robert, I wanted to dive straight in. Take us back to growing up. What was Robert like growing up?
So that's interesting. So Bro was pretty much the same, pretty hyperactive, easily distracted.
A bit like me then. Get excited about the little things, right?
Yeah, I spent lots of time looking out the window as opposed to looking inside books. And I think that was a real shift for me later on in life when I really got into the idea of reading and studying. For a long time in life, study wasn't part of my journey. So, loved primary school, loved secondary school to an extent, although it became a bit more academic at that point. I remember being outside an exam room with people talking about, it was history, and they were shouting dates at each other and naming what happened during that day, and me not having a clue what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And sort of going on to college and doing drama, because that was the one thing that I enjoyed. So I went on and studied drama. I went to a place called the Weekend Arts College as well, where I studied at the weekends. And that was a really interesting time of my life because I was this kind of East End boy. I wasn't in gangs, but I was around that kind of space. I guess we were all in gangs at that time of life. You all hang out with your mates and that's what you did.
Yeah.
But we didn't commit crime or weren't violent and stuff like that. It was just, just a group of us hanging out. And when I went off to the Weekend Arts College, as well as doing my drama, I was also doing dance. Okay. And an East End boy doing dance at that time wasn't something you really spoke about. And it was also something I didn't really understand. So I joined up, was doing the drama class. They also put me in the mime class because I was quite physical. And in the mime class, they were like, you don't have any flexibility. Let's send you off to do the ballet class. And I didn't really get what I was supposed to be doing or what was going on. And I was just in this class. They gave me a leotard, put that on, go stand at the bar and do what you're told.
So how old are you when this is all taking place?
I was kind of 15, 16 when this was taking place. Okay. So I was just leaving school, just beginning to go to college.
Yeah. Okay. So this is quite an important time because I remember at that time that you're quite susceptible to other people around you. Well, I was anyway.
Absolutely.
You take influences, you take experiences. You're almost copying what other people are doing in your peer group, right? And you just saying you were an East End boy, or lived and grew up there. Like, how was that? Like, how difficult was that to sort of transition into that?
Well, it was like two worlds. So
Hmm.
there's something really interesting about, you know, the environments we inhabit and how we behave in those environments. I remember thinking I have two worlds. So I have the world that's my home and college and hanging out with the guys and doing that kind of stuff. And then there was this space I went to on a Sunday,
Hmm.
which was all about drama and about dance and about arts and about support.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting shift. So even though at college, where people knew me, there was a dance class that I went to,
Hmm.
it was like, oh, but it's part of this course and you kind of have to do it. And we
Right.
made excuses around it. Whereas my ballet class, I just didn't tell people about.
Yeah.
I mean, I did ballet for like 2 years and just didn't talk about it to anybody outside of that physical space.
Yeah. You said you had to do it. Who was telling you, or what was the ethos behind having to do it? Where did that
It was
come
about
from?
it was about flexibility. It was
Okay.
about this idea that as a performer,
Yeah.
you know, you needed to be able to inhabit different physicalities. And, you know, in the drama class, you did more of a vocal warm up, but in the mime class, you did this real physical warm up.
Right.
And I just didn't have the flexibility or the kind of the inner core strength to do the work. You know, I
Right.
had some natural talent, and they were like, but you need some technique, and ballet is the place to go and get that technique. I mean, it's a wonderful uh, um, experience to have, to, you know, to go through that. You know, I was
Yeah.
terrible at it, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
but you know, as time went on, I was like, this is some really good stuff here, and I could see
Mhm.
the differences it was making to the other classes that I was attending.
How? So a little bit more about
So you
that.
just you could just move more. Your range of movement just increased. Your core strength increased, and sort of as your strength and your technicality, your physical technique increased, then in the mime class that became stronger and better, and you got more confident, because
Okay.
the mime stuff was all about knowing where your body is, knowing where your body is in the space,
Mm.
so that you can control it, so you can create those illusions that we create in a mime performance.
Yeah.
And then that gives you confidence, and then that confidence then builds into your drama class.
Okay. Okay. This is interesting. What's coming to me is that I mean, I know nothing about ballet or mimes or anything in that scene. I've never done anything about. But what comes to me straight away is that when I see people doing performing acts, I'll take an example. Britain's Got Talent, right?
Mm.
They have sometimes these performing acts where these two people might do this really powerful dance. Um, with some really strong music behind it, and it'd be so impactful and so emotional. And it's interesting you said that it wasn't just ballet, it was the confidence side of it. Like, so would you say like that was like helping you? You said it was helping you outside the classroom, but was that helping you internally as well as physically?
Yeah, it did. I mean, that internal external piece didn't happen for a few years.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how you can meet a lot of artists, and when they're not doing their art, they can shy away and disappear because their confidence lives in the flow of the art form that they're presenting. So that's something that I always found really
Yeah.
interesting. So, you know, you can see an actor on stage and they're funny and they're live and exciting, and
Yeah.
then you go meet them afterwards and they're really quiet, and you're like, what's that about?
So different, right?
And it's because, you know, in that moment they're fully alive, and
Mhm.
then but they're also playing a role. And so when they
Mhm.
step out of that, they go into well, who am I? But
Mm.
also you have a freedom of expression when you're on stage. You're allowed to do these things. You're allowed to be that way.
Okay.
So there's something really interesting about on stage, off stage,
Yeah.
and the confidence for me came much later. So being part of the Weekend Arts College, there was this dance drama company called Fusion that was an extension of it, and you would join that. They would devise shows, tour them, take them all over the country and stuff. And that's where the confidence started to grow, because you're around these people that are doing this thing, that are all in it together.
Hmm.
Um, and the show's the most important thing. So it's not me, it's the show. It's my part that I play in the show, which,
Hmm.
you know, jump 25, 30 years down the road. And that's where coaching sits for me as well. Whereas I'm not
Yeah.
the important thing, it's what the client's getting. That's the important thing. So there's a
Yeah. Yeah.
real synergy for me around performance, what I learn as a performer and what I do within my coaching.
Interesting, interesting. You just literally, this is why I love doing this podcast. You've literally just taken me back to a moment when I was 18 years old, and I vividly remember this. And I said that I didn't really do any of that scene or the dancing side of it or ballet, but actually I used to love dancing when I was like 17, 18. And yeah, I was going out to nightclubs doing all this stuff. But I remember there was this one nightclub local to me which we used to go to every single week, me and my friend Joe. And I remember dancing away. Like I used to love like the bebop two step and all of that. I thought it was cool, right? I thought it was cool back then. And I remember this girl jumping down off stage, seeing me and my friend dancing, handing us her card. And I looked at the card and I remember this to this day. It said United Dance Crew. She was like, "Call me. I'd love to get you in the studio for rehearsals and to see if you can join the team." And it's just funny how you brought me back to that memory. And I'm sure a lot of people that may know me that listen to this will resonate with that. So that's yeah, it's quite fascinating actually. And then I'm thinking, well, what would happen if I did see that through? I never followed it through. What would happen?
Yeah, and one of the things for theatre for me was exploring this idea. I had this
Mm.
idea I was interested in. Part of it was the one thing that I was okay at. So I was like,
Yeah,
let me see where
yeah,
that takes me. And then it became this thing that really fed me as a human being because
hmm
it was about unity. And
mm,
a lot of my external world to that, it wasn't violent or bad, but there was the banter, there was the challenge, there was all of that stuff going on. There was
yeah,
the you know being at the back of the class and not really
yeah,
understanding what was going on. But in this theatre space where everybody was working together, there was this unity and this strength around it, which kind of just really made me go, I want to do more of this. I want to
yeah,
be around these people. And I remember at the Weekend Arts College, you'd have a class at 10 o'clock and then a class at 2 o'clock, but we'd all be there until 6 o'clock because we just wanted to be around that energy of making things happen and supporting each other.
yeah. I've got this quote I always say: "It's surround yourself with like-minded people who has that good vibe and good energy, and watch the magic happen."
Yeah.
And I only realised this about 3, 4 years ago, and that's when I started to really start my personal development journey. So it sounds like you did this quite early.
And what's interesting for me is, when I look back at that, I can
Mm,
go, well, of course I've arrived where I've arrived because of that journey. But at the time, it was,
yeah,
it just became saying yes to opportunity. So, I was part
yeah,
of that for a while. I went to drama school because somebody was like, "Oh, you should go to drama school. That's your next step." I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay, I'll go and audition." And I remember my audition was awful.
yeah,
Um, and it was only because of my physical skills that I got in, because they were like, "Oh, okay, you've got something about you.
mm,
We can build that other stuff up to make that stronger." So I was like, "Great, get in there, do that." I went to a place called Rose Bruford, and I did a 3-year community theatre arts course, and it was all about community theatre and education, and that all then became a real passion for me.
mm,
That
yeah,
how do we educate, how do we support, how do we enhance other people's learning through the arts?
yeah.
And again, that kind of flips into that's what we do as coaches. So there's a real synergy and connection between these things.
Yeah. Do you know what? That's the thing. It was the fact you said yes, right? I kind of wish I knew you back then or 10 years ago now to be honestly, to be surrounded by people like that who do just say yes to opportunities, and say yes to themselves rather than saying yes to everyone else. Um,
It was also there were also quiet yeses. So now I'm much more public in my yeses, and
mm,
my yeses are much more evident in the world.
yeah.
Um, but when I joined the dance drama company, I didn't really tell people about it, and we'd go and do shows, and I didn't really share with people what were the shows we were doing or when they were happening. I was very muted about that.
Right.
Um, and I guess a big part of that was the how would the outside world respond to this? It was like, if you're on stage with people that have come to see you on stage,
Yeah.
that's different to your mates seeing you on stage and going, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was really interesting. And I think that created a bit of a divide between my worlds, because I remember when I left drama school and being back at home, and hanging out with people and just going, I don't know you anymore and you don't know me, and we can't
Yeah.
converse anymore because what you want to talk about and what I want to talk about are so far apart. I have to kind of let you
Mm.
go. And what's interesting now as I've got much older, some of those people have come back into my world, whereas
Yeah.
others just drifted away, never to be seen again.
Yeah. This is a really important topic because there's a lot of conversations I have even today, and I'm pretty sure you do too, is that, it's conforming to society, right? And it's what you said, like, you had this whole other life with the drama school and doing the ballet and really getting in touch with your emotions and feeling what you're doing and building you up as a person. But yet you still got this outside thing. The important thing is, which I always found, is that you've got to be self-aware, right? And even to this day, I still speak to some people and I'm just like, you are so not on my wavelength. We are so not together right now. We're so, like you said, so far apart. But yet people still navigate or drift towards that life because they sometimes find it easy. And this is just from my experience of what I've had conversations with. Like, what would you say? Like, you've obviously experienced this quite young and you knew about it. What would you say, or even like advice wise, give to people that maybe do want to conform to that life, which they know they don't want and they know it's wrong for them, but yet they still do?
Start small. Find
Mm.
an avenue that you can explore, because it's really hard to go from one state of being and to jump into another. I mean, yeah, you can have an epiphany, you can have that flick of the switch and everything changes.
Yeah.
But if your environment isn't conducive to that change, you have to
Mm.
begin to incrementally shift that environment. So find a space where you can explore that and you can express that, and
Mm.
then see where that builds and where that grows. We come across people that say, oh yeah, I go and I do an improv class once a week. We go, I never knew you did that. And they go, yeah, I've been doing that for 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Right.
when we look at them, we go, oh yeah, over the last 10 years, there's been a shift in you, and it's been a gentle
Mm.
shift.
Yeah.
So I would go, what's a space that you can become involved in that
Mm.
supports that change that you want to make?
Yeah.
And then how do you gently begin to allow that to seep out into your other worlds and filter into that, to your space, so that you then kind of go, right, this is who I am now.
Yeah. That's powerful stuff. That's
Because
so. Go on. Sorry.
the other thing is, people try and pull you back because
Mm.
they relate to them. Relating to you is how they understand themselves.
Yeah.
And so when you begin to change, it then kind of brings a huge mirror up to them, and they go, so what am I doing? I don't want to change, so I'm going to pull you back. It's like when people
Yeah.
give up drinking or give up smoking. There are those that go, yeah, I'm going to help you to do that, and then there's those that offer you the fag or offer you the drink or
Yeah.
try and keep you where you were, because it helps them to stay where they are,
Mm.
and it helps them to not have to look at what's the change that they might need to make.
Yeah. There's a question that's coming up to me. It's like, what benefit is this to you? How is this serving you right now? Is this serving you to your highest potential, or your inner self, right? And your inner personal growth, like where you want to be and what you want to do. And I think, yeah, that's super powerful point to make. And I fully agree with that. And I hope that anyone that's listening to this, that I had the same thing. And I wish someone told me this 10 years ago, because it was the point where you just do conform.
But the other thing is, there are times in my life I go, oh, I wish I knew this then, and I wish I knew this then. But
Mm.
there's the other pieces. We're only ready at a specific time, and it's like, when you're ready, you can embrace it and you can take it on. There's concepts that I read about, 10, 15 years ago that I just didn't get. And now I
Yeah.
look at them and go, oh, I kind of get what that means.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
I've had the life experience or I've had enough
Mm.
interactions to enable me to shift my thinking to comprehend that.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we need time to change, and we need time to understand, and time to get strong enough in ourselves to
Mm.
embrace that change. Because I think part of change is inner strength,
Mhm.
and that courage to make it. And then we need to find that courage, and we need to find that support, which is what I love about coaching, where the coach helps you to find that courage and that support within yourself to make that shift and that change. When we don't
Mm.
have a coach and we're doing it on our own, it can be much harder unless we find the group that's going to support us in that change,
Yeah,
our tribe,
absolutely.
as it were.
Absolutely. Just on that, we'll come back to your journey in a moment, but I've just got a question that has come to mind. Is that, do you believe in self-coaching?
Yes and no. So I think you can think things through, but you're always thinking things through in your own paradigm. You're always thinking things through within your own bias.
Hmm.
So when you have somebody else there, they notice what you're not noticing, or they notice what you choose not to notice and challenge you on that.
Hmm.
So we all have our blind spots. We all have the spaces that we like to be in because they feel safe.
Yeah.
Um, and when we self-coach, we just avoid that. It's really easy to avoid those spaces, but when you have a coach,
Hmm.
it's less easy to do that. And I think the more coaching you get, the easier it is to self-reflect on things. I wouldn't say self-coach, but self-reflect around things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and the reason why I asked that's because I see, and that's one thing which I took out the weekend review, that Paradigms weekend, is that, having that other lens to
Hmm.
see over you and observe what's going on, even if it's from a bird's eye view. You haven't got your own lens, you've got someone else's complete whole perspective on the situation. So yeah, and I fully agree with that. Okay, so going back to Robert Stephenson's journey, so talk us after that. So after you left drama school, when you were what, 16, 17, 18, 19,
So,
what was going on for you then?
so I left drum school, so early 20s, I think.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really bad at if it happened in the past, it's just in the past. People
Yeah.
often, people say, well, when did you meet that person? I'll go 5 years ago. And they'll go,
Mhm.
no, that was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once it's happened, it's happened. But
Yeah.
I left drama school, and I was really fortunate. My two best friends that I met at the Weekend Arts College went to the same drama school as me, and they're
Mhm.
in the year below me. So I
Mhm.
kind of hung around, did some work for a year, and then when they left, we set up our own performance company called Unclassified Arts. And it was based around physical theatre, a lot of mime stuff, comedy stuff. And we basically just created shows and toured them around Europe, took them into
Oh, nice.
schools, and we
Amazing.
just did that for forever, is what it felt like. And a lot of the performances that we did would have workshops attached to them. So we would also be going into schools and community centres and to other theatre companies doing our workshops and our performing.
Amazing. Amazing. So was that your own business or was you with other people?
It was my own, so it was our company. So we had a partnership.
Okay.
Three of us created a partnership, and one of the things that was really amazing was it kind of got me to travel, because before this I'd done very little traveling.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was in this troupe, and we were like going to Denmark and touring Denmark with our show, and Sweden. We went to Germany.
Wow.
We even went to Cuba and did some shows at a children's festival out there. And it was like all of a sudden I was being exposed to these new environments
Yeah.
through this work that we were doing. And then that also gives you that kind of life skill and understanding of the world's different, and people think about things and approach things differently.
Hmm. How did how did you get to tour like so many different countries? Like how did that even come about? Like obviously you
So
started it, but then how did it grow and progress?
it's a really interesting thing. So you'd do a show somewhere, and somebody'd go, "Oh, I really liked that.
Mm.
Um, why don't you come and do this here?" Or we started touring Denmark because there was a festival in Denmark called Ragnarok, and I was doing some work with the Weekend Arts College at this time, and they were like, "Oh, there's this festival, but we need to fundraise to go. Why don't you do the fundraising? And if you get the money, you can go, and we'll send other people with you." So I worked with the Prince's Trust and a few other people, and we got some funding. We went over and we did this festival. At the festival, um, there was a performance night. So every night, people would get up and do a thing. And we got up one night and we did our mime comedy stuff.
Hmm.
And they were like, "Oh, we love this. Would you come back?" And we're like, "Sure."
Amazing.
And
Okay.
so we, like the next year, we went back and we did another show there. And then in Denmark, they have, and in Sweden, they have these organizations that are connected, a bit like adult learning centers, but they're connected.
Okay.
So at this festival, we met somebody from Denmark, somebody from Sweden. They said, "We love your work. Will you come back and do some more?" We were like, "Yeah." And they basically organized these 4 or 5 different centers in different towns that we could go to, and we just kind of turned up and did it. And then that just grew, and then it became an annual thing where for a month and a half, I think it was, we'd just be away doing what we did.
Amazing. So just basically a true testament to actually what you were doing. People wanted more of it.
Yeah.
And
And saying yes to the opportunities. And also we
mm,
were young, so we didn't get any sense of danger, or the fact that you'd be in a foreign country without any money, so you'd have to go and busk to get enough food to buy lunch because your
Yeah.
next paying gig wasn't for another 2 weeks time. And so there was all of that was at play, which was
Oh, wow.
which also built the bond, because me and my two best friends, Steve and Isaac, so we did this for years, and so I've just really entrenched our friendship.
Amazing. So you were busking. So like,
Yeah,
well,
at times, I remember being in where was this? This was in Denmark, and we would go out in the morning, get up in the morning, have a coffee, go out, do some busking, make enough money for lunch, have lunch.
wow, really? That's
Yeah,
interesting. That's interesting.
yeah.
How long did you do that before you actually started getting a regular sort of income
Well,
from it?
that would be like, you do that for a couple of days, because then you'd be doing a theatre show, and then you get the box office split from that show, which would then support you for the next 2 weeks
Right.
of that tour.
Right.
So we'd sort of know that there'd be points where we'd be low on cash on the tour,
Yeah.
and we'd have to find ways to survive whilst we were doing it.
Oh, wow. That's interesting, because it's like an entrepreneur journey, right? There's this up, there's down, there's this up, there's this
Yeah.
massive dip, and then you've got to really graft and change your mindset to be like, well, I need to make this work, or I want to make it work. How am I going to make it work, and move forward with that? That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
And I think one of the things that shifted for us as well was we were mainly self-funded as a troupe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to work in order to earn. And over time, we noticed that we were getting more work around delivering workshops or facilitating workshops than we were getting work around performing. And
Right.
I was also doing, my acting gigs and doing the odd bit of TV and stage stuff as well. So that was kind of interspersed within it. And because we were physical artists, we belonged to a company, an agency called Physicality. So they would send you off to do hand artistry jobs and
Yeah.
dress up as character jobs and things like that. And as we began to do more and more workshops, that's when coaching kind of came around, because I was working with an organization called Creative Partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
taking artists and educators, bringing them together to create pieces of work to stimulate learning for young people.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, I worked with a lady called Matilda Gilbert, who was just really amazing at getting groups of people to have conversations, even challenging groups of people. And she would run conferences with head teachers and get them sharing and opening up. And I was just like, wow, what's that magic that you do? Because I'm okay at facilitation, but you're on another level.
Yeah.
And she talked about the various training things that she'd been on, and one of them had been coaching. And that was the kind of gateway in to coaching. I started reading about it, did a course, and then it just kind of built from there. But there was never what's really interesting, I had no plan of becoming a coach. It was to get better at what I was doing.
Yeah. So you kind of just fell into it. But then I fully believe everything happens for a reason. Just like, you said, going back, doing all the drama school, doing the ballet, and then going through to, touring. I like to call it organically. It sounds like it was just an organic growth sort of thing. But even like going through those hard times of busking, like the busking side of it, did you enjoy it, or did you be like, oh,
sometimes, there were things that we did, because we used to busk at Covent Garden, and sometimes that was great fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was just hard work.
Yeah.
You can have a great, and it's both busking and on being on stage, you can have an amazing audience. You can have a really hard audience. You can have an audience that really get where you are. You can have one that doesn't. You can be really in the zone. There was shows that we did where it was like, it felt like magic was happening with the work that we were doing. A bit like when you're in flow in a coaching session, where it's like, it's just magical.
You can feel it.
Yeah. And there are other shows, like a coaching session, where it feels like a hard graft, and you start to ask yourself the question of what's going on here that's causing that challenge in the work, and the stuckness in that, and you need to find that and remove that in order to create the flow again.
Yeah. It's a burning desire question, which I feel like a lot of people are probably thinking, is that, can you still mime?
Yeah.
Do you still do it?
Well, I don't. So every so often, some of the places that I belong to, like the Weekend Arts College, there'll be a fundraiser, and we'll get together and we'll revive one of our old pieces, dust it off, change it around, make it more modern, and then present it again. But yeah, so it's one of those skills that just, I spent so long learning it that it just just exists. I don't know if it shows on camera, but things like the Mime wall, just spent, you know, months and months just
Oh
practicing
no,
doing
that's
this
amazing.
thing,
I love that.
and it just sticks with
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
And I remember when I used to do workshops in schools, if I was having a difficult time with a group, I'd just teach them the Mime wall and teach them how to get stuck in a box,
yeah.
and they'd be back on board, and then we would go back into the work, and
I
it was like
love
one of
that.
my fail safes.
I love that. I love that. Obviously, Robert's just done a quick little demonstration. You can watch this up on YouTube if you're listening to it on podcast, on all just audio. Yeah, that's amazing. I find I always remember seeing mimes back when I was younger, and I used to love watching it because it's just a fascinating thing that not a lot of people can do, and it's almost like it is something that you work towards. It's a bit like magic, right? You know,
Yeah.
people do magic, and people get like so blown away by magic. I still do today. Still watch Dynamo; he's one of my favorite magicians. So no, I love that. I love that. Okay, cool. And then so talk us through. You just said you obviously touched on the coaching and how it just presented itself.
Yeah.
So what happened? What was the engagement? How was the transition from doing what you were doing to becoming a facilitator, coach, trainer in that field?
So what I was, you know, doing lots of drama workshops, then got brought into working with creative partnerships. Well, I was still doing my drama workshops, but now I was working with educators. So there was a
Okay.
slight shift to the focus of the work, but also how we communicated to the work. So a lot of it, well, not a lot of it, but a big part of creative partnerships was this: how do we model what we're doing so somebody else can do it? So how do I break down how I think about creating a piece of mime or physical theater
Mm-hmm.
or telling a story so a teacher could do that? And then how could we fuse that with a piece of education that we could then break down for others to do?
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of always breaking things down, looking at what the components were, putting them back together, and then presenting them. That was a kind of a big part of what we did. And then you just get better and better at facilitating and holding groups, and, you know, doing drama classes and mime classes with a group of 30 kids. Then having to work with 20 adults becomes easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can
Um,
imagine that'd be a big task.
yeah. So and also the size of a group has never been phasing for me. I mean, yes, you know, if I'm doing a presentation to 100 people, you still go, oh, there's 100 people here.
Mm-hmm.
But having been on stage with multiples of that, you're kind of used to being on that, in that spotlight, and being looked at, and being critically assessed, I guess. So there's
Yeah.
a piece of you that's used to that still has challenges around that. And then what began to happen was people just asking for more of this sort of workshop stuff and more of this facilitation stuff, and I started learning more about the coaching work. And then you know, another happy accident. I was on a forum which was called the London Coaches at that time, or the London Coaches Group, an online meetup group that was run by Nick Bolton. At that point, I didn't know Nick. I didn't know of the Smart School, which then became Animus. I
Mm-hmm.
just knew the school that I'd gone to, where I'd basically learnt the Grow model.
Yep.
And came across Nick online. We'd had an interaction and started talking about, you know, what do you do? How do you work? We met a couple of times for coffee. I talked a lot about the work that I do with young people. And he was like, oh, we're doing a thing with young adults, but it's not quite working. And I was going, because there's things that are different when you're working with young people than when you're working with adults that you need
Absolutely.
to take into consideration when it's a coaching
Mm-hmm.
frame. And so we kind of looked at that and kind of had conversations, and kind of we'd meet, talk, and then it'd be a couple of months. And then eventually we said, let's kind of create something. And that creation kind of led to a short course, a 2-day program around taking coaches who work with adults who want to work with young people. So we had a certificate in youth coaching that I delivered, and that was my kind of gateway into working with Nick and working with
Mm-hmm.
Animus.
Okay, so let's just get clarity on something. So Animus, was that when you joined, was there an Animas Centre of Coaching then, or was this the start?
So it was called the Smart School, but not for very long. So it started off as the Smart School,
Okay.
and then there was a kind of a recognition by Nick that it didn't, that word didn't really hold the philosophy of what he felt coaching was.
Okay.
And so very soon after I got involved, it shifted into Animas Centre for Coaching.
Right. Okay. Fine. So you were pretty much there from day one.
Yeah.
Right.
I was one of the sort of the ground roots person.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And how long ago was that?
Gosh, what is that?
Here we go. I'm asking that question again. Maybe it's 5. No, it's about 15.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? It must be like 13 years ago now.
Yeah. Wow. So it's a long time. Okay. I mean, look, so just for people that don't know, so I joined the Animas Centre of Coaching to do my coaching course. That's when I started my coaching journey, just over 2 years ago now. Um, and it's one of the things that's massively impacted me in my journey. And I think one of the reasons why I highly rate, and I've made many videos and many reviews about Animus, is the way that they teach, the way that you guys teach, right, and how you teach it. Because there's this, we'll talk about this for a moment. The stigma on the coaches, the word coach, life coach. It's a massive thing. I've had many conversations about it. I'm sure you have, but there was one thing which I realized and saw about Animus when I went to your training day, was that it wasn't the case that it was money driven or how much you can earn in coaching in the industry. It was more about the fundamentals of coaching and how to create that in a coaching conversation. So how would you say that Animus differs to other coaching schools in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one because, I trained maybe 2 or 3 schools
Yeah.
around coaching over my time. And what I would say that really sits with Animus is that the principles are taught as principles or frameworks, not a reality or a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of places that will teach you these ideas and say you have to do this and this has to happen, and they're looking for these markers, as it were, to be hit within a coaching session. Was Animus is about, it's much more about what's the relationship between you and your client,
Mm-hmm.
and how are you facilitating thinking within that relationship, and how are you facilitating an understanding of the self and a generating of awareness about self, so one can then make changes and make those changes of your own accord and with your own desire, in alignment with your values, your wants, your needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Animus is a real space of meeting the client where they are. I mean, Carl Rogers talks a lot about this, meeting the client where they are, person-centered therapy, person-centered coaching.
Yeah,
But a
absolutely.
lot of coaches still have this little bit of fixingness around them. How do I
Mm-hmm.
fix my client? And coaching isn't about fixing, but there's a drive to get your client somewhere.
Yeah.
And Animus has always been around, but you're going that somewhere together. And the coachee is the person that is directing where you're going. And as a
Mm-hmm.
coach, you might point out the different viewpoints, the different vistas that appear along that journey. But ultimately, it's the client's journey to go on. And you're part of the journey, but you're not the journey. You're not directing that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one thing I learned, because when I entered the coach world, I thought it was all about advising, telling someone to do something. This is how it should be done. But realistically, we're not in their shoes. We don't know them, right? That's
Yeah.
their journey to go on, not ours, and we can't force that upon anyone. And that was one thing that was a complete eye opener to me when I started at Animus, was that it's not about the advisory. It's about being there to facilitate their growth
Yeah.
and asking these really powerful questions to get them there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that confusion about coaching because they've had
Mm.
bad coaching. They've had people that have done a
Yeah.
weekend course and gone, "Oh, I'm a coach," or they've read a book and
Yeah.
gone, "Oh, I'm a coach," and they're not. They're
Mm.
a consultant, and it's fine being a consultant, but
Yeah.
that's not what coaching is.
Mm-hmm.
And so people get confused around what coaching is, and so they have experiences of people who haven't had great training.
Yeah.
And you can do great training. You can do great self-training. You can read great books around coaching. And if you're, a self-reflector, you can apply that learning to yourself and be a great coach without doing a course.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do that work to get to that point. And I think that when I meet people and they go, "Oh, coaching's rubbish," and I go, "What's your experience of it?" Often the experience is that they've had a bad coach.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's the thing, like, what would you say when people ask you? You coach as well at the moment, don't you? I remember you saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you coach regularly, or have you got regular clients? How do you operate? Obviously, aside from working at Animus.
Yeah, so I have a few regular clients that I work with. When I was freelance, I'd have more clients. When I went part-time, that went down even more. And then when I became full-time, for a while, I stopped coaching. And then the last kind of year, I've gone back into that coaching space.
Mm-hmm.
I think working in a coaching school, it's important to be coaching. It's important to be practicing the art form that you're working with. There's a throwback that I have from when I was at drama school, where we'd have people teaching us about being on stage that hadn't been on stage for like 30, 40 years. That might be an exaggeration, but
Yeah.
they hadn't done the work for a long time, but they were teaching
Mm-hmm.
us about that work. And there was a distance in that. So for me, it's always been important to keep in touch with the art of coaching as a
Mm-hmm.
practitioner, as well as a thinker and a supporter and a creator.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what would you say? Like, obviously, we meet a lot of people day to day, as always do. And one thing, when people ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" It's a difficult one, because I've been trying to. It's not difficult. I used to say I'm a transformational life coach, because that's technically what I am, right? But then people that don't know what coaching is, or maybe have not experienced it, but
Yeah.
maybe slightly intrigued, but also see this stigma around, what coaches are and how it's just a money making thing. What would you say to people? Like, how do you introduce yourself on coach terms?
What's really interesting is nowadays people come to me that they've met somebody that knows me, or they've seen me somewhere, and they go, "Oh, you do this coaching thing. Can you tell me more about it?" And I will often say, "Well, let's just experience it.
Yeah.
Let's just have a go, and then you can begin to understand what it is."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I still use that whole thing, that those kind of metaphors. It's about getting you from where you are to where you want to be. It's
Mm-hmm.
about unraveling the thoughts in your mind so you can understand yourself more clearly. It's about achieving goals. But really, I think coaching is about understanding the self.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what I do, using especially the kind of theater thinking is, we are characters playing out a story, and
Mm-hmm.
we have choice around the scenes that we play.
Yeah.
And so how do we kind of really decide what's the character that we want to be, and who is that character, and how do we uncover that character
Yeah.
so that we can choose the stories that we want to live out within our lives?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's really deep and powerful, and I fully agree. I think just going back to sort of working at Animus and how it is. Obviously, we're going through a global pandemic at the moment, and you pivoted the business to go virtual. How was that? How was that working for you at the moment? And is it still growing? Are you growing at a steady pace? Is it a struggle?
It's really interesting because there was a lot of work behind the scenes to make that pivot.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But what you can notice is that we're kind of still just gently growing as we have been.
Mm-hmm.
People have really embraced the working online. We've done lots of work to make that as accessible and engaging as possible. Work with our trainers around that, supporting our trainers around that, having co-hosts for the day. So you've got somebody who's managing all the technical, while somebody's actually managing the sharing of the information, the facilitation of the learning. So it's been a gentle shift for us without any major hiccups, but it has also created new opportunities. There are people that have chosen to come and work with us now that couldn't before because of the distance.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's opened up new avenues where people go, "Oh, actually, I can come and do this now," whereas I couldn't before because I was in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't get to you to do this weekend, whether that was in Berlin, London, or Edinburgh. So that's been really interesting to see where people have joined us that were hesitant before.
Yeah.
And then there have been people that have gone, "Actually, I want to be in a room, a physical room with somebody working." And we've gone, "Great, when we can do that, when we can get back into that space, that's something that we'll bring in. But if you're doing it in the virtual space, we'll continue doing the virtual space as well."
Do you think you will go back into a face-to-face environment?
I think we will, but I think it will be different. It'll be, I mean, it's all different. So
Tell
yeah,
me
it's all
about it.
going to
Yeah.
be different. I think
Yeah.
what's interesting is, when do we do that, and when do we feel it's safe and okay to do that for
Mm-hmm.
everybody? Because you've got your venues, but you've got your travel, your accommodation, all of those things are part and parcel of going back into in-person training. So I think there will be in-person training again, and I think that the virtual training won't disappear, because I think there'll be people that will want to continue virtually and
Yeah.
see out their training in that space. And I think there'll be people that will go, "Actually, virtual training really works for me because
Hmm.
I can be anywhere and do my training, whereas that in-person training limits that.
Yeah.
And also in-person training takes up more time than just the time of the training.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be a dual strand of delivery that will emerge from this.
Nice. Oh, amazing. Okay, so we're going to finish off now. I've got a few questions, but what would you say you're most proud of if you look back throughout your whole life? What's that one thing that sticks out?
Oh, that's a good question. What's the thing that I'm most proud of? I suppose I guess I'm most proud of um, saying yes to opportunity. I think that's the thing I'm most proud of, is going, yeah, I'll try that. I'll give that a go. I
Yeah.
see how I'll get on. And then when those things, as they sometimes do, don't work, kind of going, oh, that didn't work. Right. So
Mm,
what do we learn from that? What do we take from that? How do we move that forward? Um, I don't think there is a moment, or there are moments. It's just interesting because there are moments where I go, do you know, whether that was in theatre where we would do shows and it'd be like, we did that. When we went to Cuba, it's like we went to Cuba, we did this children's festival. It's like that was amazing that we
yeah.
made that happen.
Yeah.
I remember when we went from um, a sketch show format to a continual story format, and then we did that. We changed how we presented our work.
Amazing.
Really proud of those moments. Really proud. I remember when I delivered my first coaching training to a whole group, because when I first started working at Animus, I was just doing a 2-day course, and that was amazing, and I loved that. And then I went into delivering the diploma that you took part in, and
Hmm.
I was co-delivering that diploma. And then there was a group, I worked with that group for the whole diploma. And I remember feeling so proud that I'd, taken this group
Yeah.
from the beginnings right through the whole journey, just kind of feeling really proud of that. I'm really proud of my shifts within Animus and my growth within the organization. And looking back at, where I started, doing 2 days a quarter delivery with them, to being full time with them and part of the kind of senior leadership faculty. It's like that's an amazing growth and an expansion.
Mm.
So really proud around that as well. So it's kind of multiple things that
Yeah.
kind of sit within that.
No, do you know what? I think that's one of the biggest things I've ever done in my life. And I remember making that first YouTube video the day before I started the Foundations weekend. And I was so nervous, but yet so excited. And now I look back at, I reflect back on the 6 months that I had with you guys, and the journey, the people, the community, the
Mm.
lessons I've learned, life lessons I learned, like unbelievable. Completely, I genuinely believe this completely changed my life and how I look at things now, especially, and how I treat certain scenarios and experiences. And like you said, saying yes to opportunities, right?
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
people say no, and I'm a big believer now. Just say yes, and you know what? If you don't know how to do it, you'll figure it out. You figure it out along the way.
And I think there's also recognizing that. So even now, I say a hesitant yes to things.
Hmm.
And even now I'm still growing in the, how do I say yes and fully embrace it? How do you go all
Yeah,
in on something and just give it your full attention, your full commitment?
yeah,
Because that's the way you can really know whether you're good at something or not.
hmm.
We do that little safety valve bit where we say yes,
Yeah,
we do something, we don't quite give it our all, because then we can go, well, I didn't really try that hard,
yeah,
or I was kind of doing it. But it's like, how do you just
yeah.
go full in and hold that that level of commitment to what you're doing? And that's
Mhm.
when I think things really shift and change for you.
Yeah. So the saying I say was like, are you flirting with that experience or that thought of doing that, or do you want to get married to
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And there's this completely different way of like shifting. Okay, well, yeah, let's stop flirting now. Let's go in.
yeah.
And I fully agree with that. And that's again another super powerful comment. I appreciate that.
Because I think when you're flirting with something, you're not kind of energetically opening the doors to that thing.
Yeah,
Whether you believe in an energy from a spiritual perspective, or just how you're showing up, perspective, you're not giving it or putting it out there in a way that people can go, this is what you're doing, and let me help you and aid you within that. But when you commit to it, you go, this is what I'm doing. People go, oh, you're doing that, right? Let me help you. Or the universe, if you will open up and go, oh, you're doing that, right? How can I support you in the doing of that? And also when you commit to something, there is an internal unlocking that happens for you.
Yeah.
That allows you to find that energy and that commitment to keep pushing and to make it happen, and or to learn from it happening or not happening.
Absolutely, yeah, just completely propel you in that direction that you so badly want to go to. Okay, what is the most embarrassing experience you've ever had or encountered?
What jumps to mind is not embarrassing, it's just kind of amusing. I remember being on holiday with my partner, and I think we were in Spain, and none of us spoke Spanish, and we were in a supermarket trying to get some food, and we wanted eggs, and we couldn't find the eggs in this supermarket. And we stopped somebody that was working there, and we tried to communicate verbally with them, and they were just like didn't get it. So I did a mime of a chicken.
Here we go, using your skills,
and held the egg up and pointed to it, and they're like, "Ah, oh, yes," and took us to the egg. So that could have been embarrassing, but it's more amusing than embarrassing.
I love that. I like that. All right, that's it. You've got to use your skills, right? If you've got them, you may as well use them. I love that. I love that. Okay, cool. Well, look, Robert, I appreciate you coming on and having a conversation. There's a lot of powerful nuggets of information you gave, and it's interesting to hear your journey from doing what you were doing to how it led to doing what you're doing now, and really serving you to the best of what you want to do. And I fully believe that everything happens for a reason. Any final words?
Well, just spinning off what you're saying there, things happen for a reason. Embrace them, and you don't always have to like the reason. Sometimes the reason you kind of go, oh, I don't really like that reason. Let me move on and do something else.
Absolutely.
Or for me, it's always that we, at Animus, we talk a lot about that. Part of what we do is surfacing the truth, or facing the truth that there is choice, and what's the choice that we're making. And when you make a choice to go one way, it means you're letting another way go, and being okay with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was one question which someone sent in to me, because I said I was having this conversation with you. They are a fellow coach, and there is, why do you think I'm not sure the percentage wise, but the majority of coaches don't actually make it to be a coach and run a sustainable business? Why do you think that is?
I think that because a lot of people don't go into it to make a business. So I think the figures are skewed. I think we have to take into consideration that a lot of people learn coaching skills to understand themselves, or to get better at what it is that they do. And in the learning of that, it spins off and becomes something else. And then there are those that begin a coaching business and then go, oh, this is hard work. I'm not sure if I have the energy to sustain that hard work, because it is hard work running a business. And then there are those that are like, I'm just going to do this until this works. There are those that get lucky and find a space in the coaching world that really suits them and feeds their energy. So I think a lot of coaches coach as well, but don't make noise about it. I think, whenever I put posts out, wanting to have conversations with coaches about a particular aspect of their work, there are lots of people coming back to me. And I go, well, these people are just quietly getting on with it. When I go to conferences and you see hundreds of coaches at these conferences, they're just quietly getting on with the work of coaching, and not talking about, 6-figure, 7-figure businesses and all of that kind of stuff. So I think, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think a lot of people choose not to coach. A lot of people fall out of love of coaching. A lot of people use coaching within the current thing that they do. And some coaches just choose the hard work, or because there's a relentlessness. I think the other part of this is that there's a lot of work to get the momentum going with any business. And sometimes we come into coaching with this idea that we'll do the course and the clients will just appear as if by magic. And we kind of forget that we need to build that momentum around the clients coming to us. I think that's where people can get stuck, is in that momentum. And one of the things I've noticed recently is I've seen a few people coming back into the coaching world that kind of got frustrated with that momentum and have now kind of got, actually, I've got some new skills, or I've got a new idea, and let me go back into that and see what I can do with that and re-engage in it from a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because what you said a moment ago is that there was one thing which I never used to do, and it was actually some of the most interesting conversations I've had with coaches are about their experiences with their clients and the powerful stories that they have. But yeah, they would tell me one-on-one, but they wouldn't shout about it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing which I'm forever grateful for, learning what I know about social media and how to use it and how to actually broadcast your message, is that, wow, like who doesn't want to hear about a powerful story, right? Who doesn't want to hear about a powerful transformation of someone that can massively inspire people? And this is one thing I always say with anyone that I speak to that are coaches that may be struggling, is that, shout about your message, shout about that conversation, shout about that problem or that challenge you overcome with your client, because wow, it can completely change someone else's life without you even knowing. And I've realized that now over the 2 years that I've been coaching, is that there's the amount of stories that I've told, or questions that I've answered, or videos I've shared. I'm a big advocate for making videos, but the people that are silently listening in the background, but picking up all these things. I had someone message me the other day. They've been following me for about a year and a half, not commented, not liked, not messaged me, but then all of a sudden, that one story I told, they messaged me that I've been following you for a year and a half, and I absolutely love what you're doing. You've massively changed my life. I'm like, shout about your work, right?
Yeah. Share it, talk about it, embrace it. Don't be shy about what you do, and be around be in your tribe. Your tribe will support you and help you to grow that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Robert Stephenson, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time. If you're listening to this, please, I'll put your contact details below. If anyone's got any questions to Animus,
Awesome.
if anyone's got questions about the course, obviously I'll put all the details below. And yeah, feel free to contact us. But no, I really appreciate your time, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Cheers.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Ignite Your Mind podcast. This is a safe place for real talk on discovering powerful stories, talking about mental health, real business journeys, and hearing inspiring stories. Please do subscribe if you are listening to this on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, and leave me a comment. And more importantly, share this with anyone who you think may take value from it. New podcasts every Friday at 12 p.m. I look forward to seeing you next week.